On April 18, 1943, high above the dense emerald canopy of Bougainville, a man who had once vowed to dictate peace terms from the White House found himself hurtling towards an unforeseen destiny. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant but ill-fated architect of the Pearl Harbor attack and commander-in-chief of Japan's combined fleet, sat in the cramped fuselage of a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber. Streaking at 8,000 feet, 435 miles from the American stronghold of Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, Yamamoto had less than 60 seconds to live. He remained blissfully unaware that American fighters were already closing in from behind, screaming through the skies at 350 miles per hour, their pilots fueled by a chilling, precise intelligence. What unfolded in those critical moments over Bougainville would carve itself into the annals of military history as one of the most audacious, complex, and flawlessly executed precision strikes of World War II, Operation Vengeance. A mission so improbable, so daring, that for weeks Japanese intelligence flatly refused to believe it. When their wreckage investigators finally reached the remote crash site, measuring the vast distances involved, plotting the intricate intercept angles, and calculating the staggering fuel requirements, they were forced to confront an impossible truth. The Americans had somehow deployed a fighter aircraft capable of hunting across stretches of ocean no interceptor had ever before mastered. It was flown by pilots who could navigate hundreds of miles of featureless open water without landmarks, without reliable radios, without error, arriving exactly on time, to the minute. The weapon that made this seemingly impossible mission a tangible, deadly reality was one of the most unconventional and revolutionary fighters ever conceived: the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Its striking twin-boom configuration, tricycle landing gear, and counter-rotating propellers made it unlike anything else in the sky. Japanese pilots, awestruck by its fearsome silhouette, reportedly dubbed it Futago no Akuma, the fork-tailed devil, a nickname that, regardless of its precise wartime origins, stuck, and for very good reason. But on that fateful April morning, it wasn't the Lightning's unusual appearance or its growing fearsome reputation that truly mattered. What mattered was a capability no other American fighter in the Pacific possessed: the unparalleled range to penetrate deep into enemy territory, engage its target, and reliably return home. The story of Operation Vengeance, however, begins not with the roar of engines, but with the quiet crackle of a radio message. On April 13, 1943, deep within the clandestine halls of Station Hypo at Pearl Harbor, American cryptanalysts achieved a monumental breakthrough. They intercepted and painstakingly decoded a highly classified Japanese naval transmission detailing Admiral Yamamoto's upcoming inspection tour of forward bases in the Solomon Islands. The intelligence gleaned was astonishingly specific: exact departure times from Rabaul, precise arrival times at Balalai Airfield, near Bougainville, the types of aircraft involved, and the composition of their escort. Every single detail the Americans needed to plan a surgical intercept was laid bare. This invaluable intelligence reached Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, within hours. The decision to authorize what would become Operation Vengeance was not taken lightly. It required presidential approval. Eliminating a high-ranking enemy commander raised profound and complex questions about military ethics, potential retaliation, and the very nature of warfare. But Yamamoto was not just any commander. He was the strategic genius behind Japan's stunning early victories, including Pearl Harbor and Midway. His tactical brilliance, his strategic foresight, and his immense symbolic importance to Japanese national morale made him an invaluable and irreplaceable target. He was the embodiment of Japanese naval power. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's authorization came swiftly and decisively. Get Yamamoto. The mission was assigned to the U.S. Army Air Force's 339th Fighter Squadron, famously known as the Flying Knights, then stationed at the vital Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. But executing this intercept presented a formidable array of challenges, many of which initially seemed insurmountable. Balalai Airfield lay a staggering 435 miles northwest of Guadalcanal, across a vast, featureless expanse of open ocean. The route was dotted with Japanese-held islands, bristling with coastal observers who would instantly report any American formation. The intercept window was brutally narrow, perhaps a mere 10 minutes, during Yamamoto's bombers' approach to Balalai. Most critically, no American fighter aircraft, then based at Guadalcanal, possessed the operational range to reach Bougainville, engage the enemy, and return safely. The agile Grumman F-4F Wildcat had a combat radius of roughly 175 miles. Even the newer, more powerful F-4U Corsair could manage only about 400 miles, but only if its pilots adhered to the most fuel-efficient cruise settings, never climbed to combat altitude, and absolutely avoided any energy-consuming combat maneuvering. Only one aircraft in the entire American inventory possessed the necessary capabilities for this epic journey: the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The P-38's distinctive twin Allison V1710 engines, each producing a formidable 1,475 horsepower, gave it exceptional range and speed. With its standard internal fuel capacity of 410 gallons, augmented by two massive 165-gallon drop tanks, the Lightning could theoretically fly up to 1,950 miles. But theory and the brutal realities of combat were often vastly different things. This mission demanded flying at extremely low altitude to evade Japanese radar, navigating with absolute pinpoint precision across a featureless ocean, climbing rapidly to attack altitude upon arrival, engaging potentially superior numbers of enemy fighters, and then returning home with enough fuel reserve to avoid ditching in shark-infested waters. Major John W. Mitchell, commanding officer of the 339th Fighter Squadron, was assigned the daunting task of planning and leading this unprecedented mission. Mitchell, a taciturn combat veteran with 9 confirmed victories, approached the problem with a methodical, almost obsessive precision. Every single calculation had to be perfect. Any error in navigation, any miscalculation in fuel planning, any deviation in timing would result in either missing the intercept entirely or, even worse, running out of fuel over the vast, unforgiving ocean. Mitchell's navigation solution, though brilliant in its simplicity, was brutal in its demands. He plotted a complex dogleg course that would take the formation west toward the Russell Islands, then sharply northwest on a precise compass heading of 305 degrees. By flying extremely low, hugging the waves between 10 and 50 feet above the surface, the P-38s would remain beneath Japanese radar coverage. This carefully selected route also bypassed known observation posts and kept the formation over open water, minimizing the risk of detection. But flying such exacting compass headings over open ocean, with no visual reference points for hundreds of miles, required navigation skills that bordered on an art form. Even slight wind drift could push aircraft miles off course. Compass errors of even a few degrees would compound exponentially over the 435-mile journey. Mitchell meticulously calculated that to arrive at the intercept point within a mere 5 miles, close enough to visually acquire the target, his navigation error could not exceed a single degree over the entire 2-hour flight. The fuel calculations were equally unforgiving. At optimal cruise settings, 2,000 revolutions per minute, 32 inches of manifold pressure, the P-38s would burn approximately 70 gallons per hour per engine, totaling 140 gallons per hour for the twin-engined aircraft. The outbound leg alone would consume roughly 280 gallons. Climbing to attack altitude and engaging in combat would burn another precious 100 gallons. The return flight would require an additional 280 gallons, totaling 660 gallons for the mission. This would leave a dangerously slim reserve of roughly 115 gallons. Mitchell planned for the formation to maintain strict radio silence throughout, cruise at a precise 185 mph indicated airspeed, and avoid any unnecessary maneuvering. Every climb, every turn, every burst of throttle consumed fuel they literally could not spare. On the evening of April 17th, Mitchell briefed the mission to 18 hand-picked pilots. The identity of their target sent shockwaves of stunned silence through the briefing room. Captain Thomas Lanphier, Jr., one of the assigned shooter pilots, later recalled, "The room went absolutely silent when we learned who we were hunting." This wasn't just another intercept. This was a chance to eliminate the man who planned Pearl Harbor. The mission profile was straightforward in concept, but nightmarish in execution. 12 P-38s would form the high cover element, tasked with providing protection against Japanese interceptors. 4 P-38s would form the killer flight, specifically designated to engage Yamamoto's bombers directly. Major Mitchell himself would navigate and control the formation, with Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber making the actual intercept. At precisely 7:13 on the morning of April 18th, the P-38 formation roared down Henderson Field's steel matting runway, climbing into the clear morning air. Each Lightning carried its full internal fuel: 2 165-gallon drop tanks, 4 50-caliber machine guns with 500 rounds each, and 1 potent 20mm cannon with 150 rounds. Their total takeoff weight exceeded 18,000 pounds, the heaviest the P-38s had ever flown operationally. The formation descended to wave-top altitude and turned northwest. Below them, the vast Pacific stretched empty and blue to the horizon. No landmarks, no navigation aids, just Mitchell's compass and a stopwatch, racing against relentless fuel consumption and a rendezvous that had to be perfect to the minute. The P-38's unique configuration was absolutely critical to making this long-range navigation possible. The twin-boom design placed the engines and propellers far from the fuselage, dramatically reducing cockpit noise and vibration compared to single-engine fighters. Pilots could endure hours of flying without the crippling physical fatigue that plagued Corsair and Wildcat pilots. Its tricycle landing gear provided excellent forward visibility during taxi and takeoff. The counter-rotating propellers eliminated the torque effects that often made other powerful fighters difficult to handle. But it was the Allison engines that truly transformed the Lightning into a long-range weapon. Unlike air-cooled radials that ran hot and required careful cylinder head temperature management, the liquid-cooled Allisons could maintain consistent temperatures indefinitely, crucial for sustained optimal performance. Their turbo superchargers, fed by exhaust gases, maintained manifold pressure at altitude without the parasitic power losses of mechanical superchargers. This unparalleled efficiency translated directly into its legendary range. The formation maintained strict radio silence as they crossed the 200-mile mark, a lonely speck over the endless ocean. Mitchell checked his navigation constantly, meticulously comparing his compass heading against drift indicators, verifying airspeed and fuel consumption against his pre-computed flight plan. At 185, pH indicated, the lightning formation was making roughly 220 miles over the water, accounting for wind. At 08:33, 1 hour and 20 minutes into the flight, the southern coast of Bougainville appeared ahead, exactly where Mitchell's calculations had predicted. The navigation error over 435 miles was less than 2 miles. The formation had arrived precisely on schedule, precisely on target. Fuel consumption was tracking Mitchell's meticulous predictions with legendary precision. Then the call came. At 09:34, within 1 minute of the predicted intercept time, Mitchell's wingman spotted the enemy formation. 2 formations of aircraft approaching from the north. Yamamoto's transport, precisely on schedule, exactly where American intelligence had predicted, flying straight towards them at 8,000 feet. Admiral Yamamoto's transport consisted of 2 Mitsubishi G4M bombers and 6 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters. The bombers, codenamed Betty by Allied intelligence, were fast medium bombers pressed into transport duty. Yamamoto himself rode in the lead bomber, piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Teao Kotani. His Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, occupied the second bomber. The Zero escorts were among Japan's finest fighters, flown by experienced pilots from the elite 204th Air Group. Fast, incredibly maneuverable, and deadly in a dogfight, the Zero had dominated Pacific skies for 18 months, instilling fear in Allied pilots. The Japanese pilots, completely unaware that American fighters had penetrated this deep into their heavily defended perimeter, maintained a relaxed escort formation, their guard seemingly down. Mitchell's formation jettisoned their now empty drop tanks and split immediately. The 12-plane cover group climbed aggressively to engage the Zero fighters. The 4-plane killer flight, Lanfear, Barber, and their wingmen plunged down towards the bombers. What transpired in the next 90 seconds remains one of the most intensely debated engagements in aviation history. Multiple pilots claimed credit for the kill. Gun camera evidence was incomplete and often ambiguous. Japanese accounts contradicted American reports, but the ultimate outcome was unambiguous and devastating. Admiral Yamamoto's bomber was destroyed. The admiral himself eliminated instantly, and the mission succeeded beyond all expectations. Lieutenant Rex Barber's combat report, filed hours after landing, described approaching the trailing bomber from behind and below. At approximately 200 yards range, Barber unleashed hell, opening fire with all guns. The combined firepower, 4 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, poured into the bomber's right engine and fuselage. The G4M, ironically nicknamed Hamaki, or cigar, by its own Japanese crews, for its tendency to ignite when damaged, erupted in a catastrophic inferno. Captain Thomas Lanfear, simultaneously engaging the lead bomber carrying Yamamoto, reported intercepting from the side as the pilot attempted desperate evasive maneuvers. Lanfear's guns raked the bomber from engine to tail. The left engine exploded. The bomber's wings separated from the fuselage, and the aircraft entered an uncontrolled, fiery descent into the unforgiving jungle below. Above them, the cover flight engaged the 6 Zero fighters in a swirling, furious dogfight. The P-38's superior speed, devastating firepower, and robust construction effectively offset the Zero's renowned maneuverability advantage. Lieutenant Besby Holmes destroyed a Zero. The remaining Japanese fighters, completely surprised and disoriented by the sudden appearance of American aircraft 400 miles from the nearest Allied base, eventually broke off their engagement to protect the sole surviving bomber, which carried Vice Admiral Ugaki. The entire engagement, from initial contact to disengagement, lasted less than 3 minutes. Mitchell, ever vigilant of his pilots' dwindling fuel states, ordered the formation to break off and head for home. The return flight, a desperate race against fuel exhaustion, tested every pilot's discipline and nerve. Lieutenant Raymond Hine, one of the cover pilots, ran his tanks dry on the journey back. His aircraft went down at sea and was never found, a grim and poignant reminder of how incredibly narrow the fuel margins truly were. The remaining 17 P-38s landed safely at Henderson Field, their fuel tanks showing perilously close to empty. Total mission time, 3 hours and 10 minutes. Distance flown, 870 miles. Mitchell's navigation and fuel planning had proven flawlessly accurate under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The immediate aftermath was confusion. American pilots knew they had engaged bombers and escort fighters. They knew both bombers had been destroyed or damaged. But Yamamoto's identity as the target wasn't confirmed until Japanese radio intercepts, meticulously monitored over the following days, revealed unprecedented and somber morning broadcasts from Tokyo. The Japanese Navy's official announcement of Yamamoto's death came on May 21st, more than a month after the attack. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto had perished in combat over Bougainville while directing operations. The announcement shocked Japan to its core. Yamamoto was the nation's most celebrated naval commander, a strategic genius whose reputation approached mythical status. Japanese reaction to the intercept revealed the profound psychological impact of the loss. Initial reports attempted to blame the incident on sheer bad luck, an unfortunate encounter with routine American patrol aircraft. But as more details emerged, Japanese intelligence officers were forced to confront far more disturbing implications. American fighters had appeared 435 miles from their base at precisely the predicted time, at exactly the predicted location. This suggested either extraordinary, almost impossible, luck, or something far more troubling. The Americans had broken Japanese naval codes and could read their most sensitive operational traffic. Investigation teams reaching the crash site near Boeing found Yamamoto's body still strapped in his seat, thrown clear when the bomber disintegrated on impact. Medical examination later confirmed he had been hit instantly and died before the crash. The debate over whether Lanfear's or Barber's guns delivered the fatal rounds would continue for decades, with both pilots' claims supported by different evidence and eyewitness accounts. But the wreckage itself told a devastatingly clear story. The bomber had absorbed concentrated, heavy fire from multiple .50 caliber machine guns and cannon rounds. The right engine showed catastrophic battle damage. The fuselage was riddled with punctures consistent with .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary ammunition. Most significantly, investigators meticulously measuring distances from the crash site to known Allied bases confronted an impossible calculation. Henderson Field lay 435 miles away. No Allied fighter had ever demonstrated such range in previous operations. Japanese intelligence files, captured after the war, revealed their internal analysis of the Yamamoto intercept. Initial assessments, driven by disbelief, dismissed the possibility of a planned assassination, instead attributing the encounter to an unfortunate coincidence. But as wreckage analysis progressed, as distances were calculated and intercept geometry was painstakingly examined, Japanese analysts reached an inescapable and terrifying conclusion. The Americans had indeed developed fighter aircraft capable of operating at ranges previously considered utterly impossible. The P-38 Lightning, the aircraft that made Operation Vengeance possible, represented revolutionary thinking in fighter design. When Lockheed began its development in 1937, conventional wisdom dictated that fighters should be small, light, and agile. The Lightning, by contrast, was large, heavy, and fast. Its distinctive twin-boom configuration emerged not from aesthetic choice, but from practical engineering requirements. Lockheed's visionary design team, led by Hall Hibbard and the legendary Clarence Kelly Johnson, needed to mount a heavy armament package without the structural complications of firing through a propeller arc. Placing the guns in the nose solved the synchronization problem, but required locating the engines in wing-mounted nacelles. This unconventional layout, however, provided unexpected advantages. The central nacelle housed the pilot, instruments, and all armament, 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20 mm cannon, creating a devastatingly concentrated fire package with no convergence issues. All guns pointed exactly where the pilot aimed. The effective range of this concentrated fire extended to an incredible 600 yards, far beyond the convergence-limited range of wing-mounted guns found on most other fighters. The twin Allison V-1710 engines, each displacing 1,010 cubic inches, produced a combined power output exceeding any single-engine fighter. But more importantly, having 2 engines provided crucial redundancy. P-38 pilots routinely returned to base on a single engine after battle damage, an option utterly unavailable to single-engine pilots who faced the grim choice of ditching or bailing out. The turbo supercharger system gave the Lightning exceptional high-altitude performance. While other fighters suffered significant power loss above 20,000 feet, the P-38 maintained full rated power to nearly 30,000 feet. This altitude advantage proved decisive in the Pacific, where Japanese bombers often operated at 25,000 feet or higher to evade anti-aircraft fire. But it was ultimately its extraordinary range that made the Lightning irreplaceable in the vast Pacific theater. The immense distances separating island bases meant that most strategic targets lay far beyond the reach of single-engine fighters. The P-38, with its efficient cruise performance and massive fuel capacity, could escort bombers deep into enemy territory or conduct long-range intercepts impossible for any other aircraft. The mission to eliminate Admiral Yamamoto demonstrated these unique capabilities spectacularly. No other American fighter could have made that journey. The F-4F Wildcat's maximum range was roughly 700 miles, completely insufficient even with drop tanks. The F-4U Corsair could theoretically reach Bougainville, but would arrive with fuel reserves so marginal that any combat maneuvering or navigation error would mean certain ditching at sea. Only the P-38 provided both the range to reach the target and sufficient fuel margin to conduct demanding combat operations upon arrival. The Lightning's combat record in the Pacific ultimately validated its revolutionary design philosophy. P-38 units in the Pacific theater destroyed more Japanese aircraft than any other single fighter type, tallying over 1,800 confirmed victories. The top two American aces of the war, Major Richard Bong with 40 victories and Major Thomas McGuire with 38, both flew P-38s exclusively. Japanese pilots' respect for the Lightning bordered on fear. Unlike the Zero, which relied on maneuverability and lightweight construction at the cost of armor, and self-sealing fuel tanks, the P-38 was a heavily armed, robustly built, and well-protected weapons platform. Japanese pilots quickly discovered that head-on attacks, often effective against lightly built American fighters like the P-39, were suicidal against the Lightning's concentrated nose armament. Saburo Sakai, Japan's highest-scoring surviving ace with 64 victories, recounted his encounters with P-38s over Guadalcanal. Later writing, "The fork-tailed fighter was fast, heavily armed, and could absorb punishment that would destroy our fighters. Attacking from behind was dangerous. Their firepower was devastating. Attacking from ahead was fatal. You flew directly into 8 heavy weapons firing simultaneously. The Lightning was the most dangerous fighter we faced." The strategic implications of Operation Vengeance extended far beyond the elimination of a single, albeit pivotal, commander. Japanese naval leadership never fully recovered from Yamamoto's loss. His replacement, Admiral Minechi Koga, though competent, lacked Yamamoto's strategic vision, aggressive instinct, and inspiring charisma. Japanese naval operations became increasingly defensive and reactive. More significantly, the successful intercept demonstrated unequivocally that American intelligence could penetrate Japanese communications security at the highest levels. Japanese code changes following the Yamamoto incident came too late. American cryptanalysts at Station Hypo had already compromised the updated codes. This intelligence advantage would prove absolutely decisive in subsequent campaigns from the Philippines to Iwo Jima. The psychological impact on Japanese morale was equally devastating. If the architect of Pearl Harbor, protected by escort fighters hundreds of miles inside Japanese-controlled territory, could be eliminated with such surgical precision, then no Japanese commander was safe. The message was chillingly clear. American reach extended anywhere. American intelligence penetrated everywhere, and American fighters could hunt across distances that defied belief, striking with impunity. For American forces, Operation Vengeance provided a tremendous and much-needed morale boost during a period when ultimate victory still remained distant and costly. The successful strike proved that American aviation technology, American planning, and American pilots' skill could execute missions of extraordinary complexity and danger. The Lightning pilots who flew Operation Vengeance became instant legends. Major John Mitchell, whose unparalleled navigation brought the formation to the intercept point within minutes of the planned time after 435 miles over open ocean, received the Navy Cross, an unusual decoration for an Army Air Force officer, but one that powerfully reflected the mission's immense strategic importance to naval operations. Captain Thomas Lanphier Jr. and Lieutenant Rex Barber, the two pilots who engaged Yamamoto's bomber directly, both received the Navy Cross. The ongoing controversy over who actually delivered the fatal rounds never diminished either pilot's incredible achievement. Both engaged targets under intense combat conditions after navigating hundreds of miles of ocean. Both demonstrated exceptional combat skill against a numerically superior enemy, and both returned safely despite critically marginal fuel reserves. The sheer technical achievement of Operation Vengeance, precision navigation over 435 miles of featureless ocean, using only a compass and stopwatch, arrival within 1 minute of the planned time, successful engagement against superior numbers, and safe return despite marginal fuel reserves, represented an apex of aviation excellence that contemporary European operations rarely matched. The P-38 Lightning that made the mission possible continued serving throughout the Pacific War with unparalleled distinction. By war's end, Lightning squadrons had flown thousands of long-range missions across the vast Pacific theater, escorting bombers to targets deep in enemy territory, conducting vital reconnaissance flights over heavily defended areas, and hunting Japanese shipping across thousands of miles of ocean. The aircraft's unusual configuration, initially viewed with skepticism by pilots trained on conventional single-engine fighters, proved ideally suited to the unique conditions of the Pacific. The spacious cockpit dramatically reduced pilot fatigue during missions that often lasted 6 or 7 grueling hours. The twin engines provided crucial redundancy that saved countless pilots who limped home on a single engine after battle damage. The concentrated nose armament delivered a devastating firepower that Japanese aircraft, built light to maximize maneuverability, simply could not withstand. But beyond technical specifications and impressive combat statistics, the Lightning represented something even more profound: the sheer capability of American industrial and technological might. While Japanese factories struggled to produce enough Zero fighters to replace combat losses, American production lines delivered P-38s by the thousands, overwhelming their adversaries. While Japanese pilots flew aircraft with minimal armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks, and limited firepower, American pilots climbed into heavily armed, well-protected aircraft that gave them every technological advantage available. The stark contrast between American and Japanese fighter design philosophy reflected broader strategic realities. Japanese designers, facing limited industrial capacity and severe raw material shortages, built fighters optimized for maximum performance from minimum resources. Every pound of weight was ruthlessly eliminated. Armor was removed, fuel tanks left unprotected, and structural margins minimized, all in a desperate bid to maximize speed and maneuverability. American designers faced no such constraints. Abundant aluminum, virtually unlimited engine production, and vast manufacturing capacity meant American fighters could be built heavy and strong. Armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, redundant systems, and heavy armament came standard. The P-38, weighing a hefty 12,000 pounds, loaded compared to the Zero's mere 6,000 pounds, epitomized this philosophy. Build the best fighter possible without compromise, then produce it in overwhelming numbers. This industrial advantage ultimately decided the Pacific War as surely as any battle fought. By 1944, American factories were producing aircraft faster than Japanese forces could eliminate them. Pilot training similarly reflected overwhelming American advantages. By mid-war, American fighter pilots arrived in combat with hundreds of hours of flight time. Japanese pilots, facing desperate fuel shortages and strained resources, often entered combat with less than 100 hours. The result was inevitable. American pilots, flying superior aircraft, supported by unlimited fuel and ammunition, backed by an industrial capacity that replaced losses within days, systematically dismantled Japanese air power. By 1945, Japanese fighters rarely opposed American formations, not because Japanese pilots lacked courage, but because so few remained alive. The Yamamoto intercept, executed on April 18, 1943, foreshadowed this eventual, crushing outcome. The mission demonstrated that American technology, American planning, and American pilot skill could execute operations that Japanese forces simply could not counter or even comprehend. The Lightning pilots, who flew 435 miles across open ocean, arriving precisely on time to eliminate Japan's most capable naval commander, proved what American aviation would accomplish over the next 2 years. Victory through technological superiority, industrial capacity, and operational excellence. Today, beautifully preserved P-38 Lightnings sit in museums across America, their twin booms and distinctive profile instantly recognizable. These aircraft represent far more than mere technological achievement. They represent the incredible capability of American industry to design, produce, and deploy weapons that fundamentally won the war. They represent the extraordinary skill and bravery of American pilots who flew these complex machines into combat under conditions that tested both human and machine limits. And they represent missions like Operation Vengeance. Operations so audacious, so precisely executed, that the enemy initially refused to believe them possible. Japanese pilots who painstakingly searched the jungle near Boeing on April 18, 1943, found wreckage scattered across a hillside and the broken body of their nation's most celebrated admiral. As they measured distances, calculated intercept geometry, and examined the concentrated pattern of battle damage, they confronted a reality that shattered their most fundamental assumptions. American fighters had hunted across hundreds of miles of ocean and struck with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. The fork-tailed devil, whether the Japanese truly called it that during the war, or, if the name emerged later, had spoken, and Admiral Yamamoto had become its most famous target. Eliminated by pilots he never saw, flying aircraft he didn't know existed, guided by intelligence he never suspected was compromised. The mission succeeded because Lockheed engineers had built a fighter with unmatched range, because American cryptanalysts had broken Japanese codes, because Major John Mitchell could navigate 435 miles over open ocean within a minute of the planned time, and because American pilots could execute a mission of extraordinary complexity without error. That combination, technological excellence, intelligence superiority, operational planning, and unparalleled pilot skill, defined American air power in the Pacific. And on April 18, 1943, above the jungles of Bougainville, it delivered a message that echoed across the entire Pacific theater. Nowhere was safe, no one was untouchable, and American fighters could hunt anywhere their enemies tried to hide. The Lightning that made it possible flew home with nearly empty tanks, having covered 870 miles in 3 hours and 10 minutes. Behind it lay one of the most successful precision strikes in military history. Ahead lay 2 more years of grueling war and thousands more missions. But Operation Vengeance remained unique. The day American fighters flew farther than anyone believed possible and eliminated the man who planned Pearl Harbor. Japanese intelligence officers examining wreckage in the jungle and measuring impossible distances finally understood what American industry had achieved. The fork-tailed fighter wasn't just another aircraft. It was a weapon that could reach across the vast Pacific, strike with surgical precision, and vanish before defenses could respond. It was in every way that mattered. The weapon Japan could neither build nor counter. And Admiral Yamamoto, whose brilliance had given Japan early victories, who had warned his superiors that America's industrial might would ultimately prove decisive, became the tragic proof of his own prophecy. Eliminated by a fighter his nation could never match, flown by pilots his forces could never train in sufficient numbers, guided by intelligence his codes could not protect against. 435 miles. Precision navigation across open ocean, perfect timing, overwhelming firepower, safe return. Operation Vengeance demonstrated everything the P-38 Lightning was designed to achieve, and everything American air power would become. Unstoppable, inescapable, and absolutely decisive. If you were captivated by this incredible story, don't miss out on more gripping tales from the skies of World War II. Hit that subscribe button and join the WW2 Broken community for more historical insights straight from the battlefields and airspaces of the past. Your support helps WW2 Broken continue to bring these vital stories to life.